This podcast is for mature audiences only. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back to From Crime to Crime.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
Listen, you ready to just get into this?
Yeah, third time's a charm.
Yeah, we have recorded this episode. This would be the third time now. So
yeah,
just know we wanted to get you guys an episode really badly this week. And it's all my fault.
I think that's pretty clear.
It usually is. All right.
No.
You ready to jump in?
Yeah.
Let's just do
This
it.
week, Grant's going to tell the story, guys, because I've had a crazy busy week, and this is the third time we're recording this, so we're making Grant do it as punishment. So
So you can tune out now, like this is your warning, or you can stick through it.
Yep.
On September 29th, 1982, 7 people in the Chicago area ingested poisoned extra-strength Tylenol pills. All 7 of them would end up dying that same day. The victims were Paula Prince, Mary McFarland, Mary Reiner, and Mary Kellerman.
That's a lot of Marys.
It is a lot of Marys, but they just all happened to be named Mary. It was a total coincidence.
Yeah.
No other reason.
Well, it's the Midwest. Everybody's name's Mary.
How many people do you know named Mary from the Midwest?
Well, my grandpa's sister's name is Mary, and her daughter-in-law, and her daughter-in-law. Like, there's 3 women in the same side of my family that are all named Mary.
They're all named Mary. Are they married?
Yeah, they're all married to men with the same last name because they're married to a grandfather, a son, and a son, a grandson.
Oh my
So they all
God.
have the same last name, too.
Well, that's ridiculous, like, honestly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I know.
and since you asked, my grandmother, who was born in Ohio, East Palestine, by the way, her name was also Mary. So I guess you're right. It is a Midwest thing.
Yeah, must be.
The last 3 victims were Adam Janus, Stanley Janus, and Teresa Janus. All 3 of these Januses were from the same family. 27-year-old and healthy and active Adam Janus collapsed at his home unexpectedly, totally random. And he had what were heart attack-like symptoms. And again, he had no pre-existing conditions or anything.
Yeah, he was 27.
Right, and a healthy 27-year-old. Like, there was nothing going on, but he had been rushed
Yeah,
to
he
the
was a postman, so he literally walked all day for a living.
There was no reason why he should have these symptoms or where he would later die after being rushed to the hospital.
Yeah.
So after returning home from the hospital, Adam's brother Stanley, understandably upset, tense, had a headache. His older brother had just very unexpectedly had died. He saw a bottle of Tylenol on the counter and he took a pill or 2 from the bottle. His wife Teresa, who also was going through very similar emotions, also grabbed a pill or 2 from the bottle. Both of them collapsed in similar symptoms to Adam and both later died as well. So Stanley Janus was just 25 years old and Teresa was just 19. Making 3 deaths by 3 very young people in the same family on the same day. Just absolutely heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking, but the only relief that would come from that is that the 3 of them dying together in the same house on the same day is what would lead the investigators to connect that something was going wrong with the Tylenol, because they were like, 3 people can't randomly die in the same house of natural causes on the same day. So that caused them to investigate on what could have killed them, and poison was the only thing they could come to was the only logical conclusion.
Absolutely. And on the night of the 29th, that's when Cook County investigator Nick Pichos started looking around to see if there were any other victims around the same age or died or had similar symptoms or anything like that. And he did come across these other victims. So Pichos compared the Janus bottle of Tylenol to the bottle of another victim who had died in a very similar way, Mary Kellerman. He noticed that the one thing in common was a control number on the back of the bottle, MC2880. Other than that, there was nothing that matched about these bottles at all.
That was one connection, so they recalled everything with MC2880 immediately.
It gave him a place to start, finally.
Yeah.
Deputy Medical Examiner Edmund Donahue suggested that Pichos smell the bottle, and Pichos said that both of the bottles smelled like almonds, and I had no idea that cyanide smells like almonds.
Yeah. And did you know that only 40% of the population can smell cyanide?
No. Really?
Yeah. Only 40% of the population has the gene that makes you be able to smell cyanide.
So cyanide specifically, if you can smell almonds, you can smell cyanide, or?
No, just cyanide.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that's equally just as terrifying.
Well, so it's lucky though that Pichos could smell it, because if he was one of the people that couldn't smell it, he might have said, no, there's nothing.
It's a really good point. I didn't think about that. In any of these 3 recordings, I'd never thought about that. So
Yeah.
that is a good point.
See, I guess third time's is a charm.
Yeah, we're learning something new. Cyanide is obviously a poison, and when exposed to it, its symptoms include things like seizures, cardiac arrest, and respiratory failure. So all of these are obviously very horrendous ways to die. And when the blood results came back, it showed that all 7 of the victims had taken a dose between 100 to 1,000 times the lethal dose.
Yeah, it was way too much. I watched an interview with a member of the Janus family, and they said that they were told that it was enough to kill 26 elephants.
Oh my gosh.
So way too much.
That is an astronomical number.
Yeah, it wasn't like a whoops.
No.
We messed up a little bit on the dosage of something in this. Like, it was definitely on purpose.
Wow. No, I didn't realize that. That's absolutely insane.
Yep.
So Deputy Medical Examiner Edmund Donahue spoke to a Johnson & Johnson attorney, which is the parent company of Tylenol, on October 1st and let them know that investigators were pretty sure that the bottles of Tylenol had been intentionally poisoned with potassium cyanide. So that night, the announcement was made that all Tylenol would be pulled from the shelves immediately. It was all coming off.
Yeah, instead of just the specific batch numbers from the victim, they were like, okay, this is too many batch numbers. Let's just pull everything.
Absolutely. This meant more than 31 million bottles were recalled, and recalled bottles would be replaced with new bottles, so good on Johnson & Johnson. But they also put up a $100,000 reward for anybody who had information leading them to the person who had poisoned the bottles. Again, that's a huge number, but they had to find out what was going on.
Yeah.
At this point, this whole thing is estimated to have cost the company $100 million, which that's a whole lot of money now. In 1982, that is an astronomical number.
Yep. But they did really good. I mean, they still even teach their response to this in business schools because they did everything right when this happened. They recalled, they replaced, they even paid advertisements. Like, they pulled commercials and stuff off the air, and they paid for new commercials telling people to throw out their Tylenol.
Wow. I mean, they really did go through everything, and they had to. People were dying.
Yeah.
Like, they had no other choice, but luckily they responded in probably the best possible way that they could. I mean, if they're still talking about how they responded, it must have been just, that's the standard.
Yeah, it's definitely not how they would respond today.
No, that's kind of what I was thinking, which is crazy. But
yeah,
by October 5th, both the FBI and the attorney generals had also been brought in to investigate this case, which good for local authorities for including them because they needed more manpower. Mm-hmm. Between local authorities and the feds, they had 1,200 actual leads, which so many actual leads to go off of.
It's chaos. I'm sure. I mean, besides the panic of people dying from Tylenol, it was just chaos, the amount of leads they had to follow and the amount of different investigators that were involved because each one of these poisonings happened in a different suburb of Chicago or in Chicago. It's like there was like 8 different police departments plus the feds involved in this.
Right. And even though that this only happened in Chicago and like its outskirts, people all over the country started believing that they had been poisoned too. So this obviously caused mass chaos in hospitals and poison control centers. They were being inundated with people left and right.
Well, yeah, because who takes Tylenol? People who are sick. So if you're sick and then you take Tylenol, and then you're sick, you're like, hey, did I get... One of the interviews with one of the investigators I saw, he's like, hey, if you had time to dial our number and ask us these questions, like, you're fine. You didn't get one of the bad ones. Like, it was that there was so much cyanide. Like, it happened that fast. Like, these people would not have time to, like, be freaking out about this and call and...
Yeah. And this was so bad for the people in Chicago that police actually started going around using their PA systems out of their cars and warning people about the bottles of Tylenol and to throw them out, that they were no good and they'd been poisoned and stuff. So it was crazy.
Yeah, telling people to flush their Tylenol, which probably saved a lot of lives, too.
Oh, I'm sure that it did. You know, they would kind of pull back on that later. But yeah, I'm sure it saved a lot of lives, and that's what they had to do.
Yeah. Well, pull back on that later only because then they didn't test all the bottles, so they don't really know how much was actually out there. But
exactly. But
yeah. But if it saved one life, it was worth not ever knowing how much was actually out there.
Absolutely. And one of the facts of this case that really confused police was that all of the victims had bought their bottles of Tylenol from different stores, and these stores got their batches from different production plants. So police really had no idea how this could be happening.
Well, it was starting to become more obvious that it didn't happen during manufacturing, like they assumed it did at first. Because if it did, then it would have been all over the country, not just in Chicago.
Right, and that would have made sense for, an employee to have put them in and, easy peasy, but now they're figuring out that's not what happened.
Right.
And with over 10 million recalled pills, they only found 50 capsules that contained cyanide across 8 different bottles, and 5 of those bottles belonged to the victims. So the other 3, 2 of them were part of the recall, but the last bottle was found just sitting on a store shelf waiting to be bought. And I think that's so crazy to think about.
Yeah, so 3 total that still could have been harmful, but then like they said, they have no idea how many more, because if somebody could have bought them and then just tossed them. They don't know.
Absolutely. And, they still had that last bottle. And before you can ask, there were no fingerprints on that bottle. And this was 1982. So they didn't have any cameras. Well, they had cameras. They were a thing, but they weren't as common as they are. And they certainly didn't cover as much ground as they did in a store or parking lot. So,
yeah, they're about as clear as they still are today.
Right? That was going to be the next thing I said. Like, you're looking now and you're like, dude, I don't know. That guy's,
Yeah, that could be anybody.
That guy's robbing a bank and it looks like, it could be on Mars. Who knows?
Oh, I didn't know there was banks underwater. How did you get this camera footage?
Yeah, right? I was real confused there for a second. I was like, what? Absolutely. It does completely look like these people are underwater.
Yeah. So in 1982, you can imagine, I'm sure, it was like, oh, something moved across the screen.
It was like watching Skinamax. It was like watching Skinamax in the 90s looking for a nipple.
It's all scrambled.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I think it might have been it. I think I saw one.
Yeah.
Anyway, so obviously police have no clue who this could be. And one of the tactics they used was they publicized the funerals. And this was in hopes that the killer would come to one of them, because we know killers love to come back to the scene of the crime. So they put it out there hoping that this would lure this person or persons.
Yeah, because at the time they're thinking like, oh, this might have been a targeted thing. Like maybe this person was trying to kill somebody specifically, not just random.
Exactly. And from what they could tell, nobody suspicious did come to these funerals. So they started to speculate that this could be a white-collar crime syndicate. And the intention of this white-collar crime syndicate would be to tank Johnson & Johnson's stock, which this did take a big hit. Tylenol went from owning 38% of the non-prescription pain reliever market to just 8% overall of this. So that's a massive fall, because nobody wanted to mess with Tylenol anymore. Like, who knew what it could be?
So they were literally like, Advil did this?
Yeah, right.
Are you kidding me?
Bayer snuck into the batch.
Yeah. I'm like, I guess you have to look at all the possibilities, but that seems like a big risk, because even though, yes, it tanked Tylenol's stock specifically, it would make people distrust pharmaceuticals in general. Like, I wouldn't be taking an Aleve either,
Yeah.
Or an Excedrin or an Advil. Like, there's no way.
Yeah, especially when you get down to it. And all these companies are owned by the same people anyway, so it's all coming from the same place.
Yeah, so it's like, I don't know. I do understand why they had to look at it that way, but that's, to me, feels like the least likely scenario.
Oh, yeah, I think so too. A crime syndicate doing it this way, yeah, this seems pretty unlikely. But they looked everywhere. They looked at disgruntled employees too. They started talking to everybody who might have had any kind of reason to do this. They even started looking at release psych ward patients to see what they were up to and stuff like that. They were looking under every single rock. They didn't know what to do. But the best theory that police had was that this person who did this went to the store, bought the bottles, left the store, and either went home or did this in their car and took the capsules apart, planted the cyanide in the pills, returned the bottles back to the store around September 28th. And the reason they had this date in mind was because obviously this would be one day before the first death occurred. And the reasoning why they came up with this was that the cyanide would eventually eat through the capsules. So whoever did this would have to have done it close to the time that the capsules were purchased and consumed.
Otherwise, it would have ate them away in the bottle.
Absolutely.
Eroded them.
And that's why they led them to believe that the person must also be from the Chicago area as well. It's probably not somebody from out of town or out of state or anything.
I mean, I get what they're saying, but it just means that the person was in Chicago. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be from there.
It would have to be pretty quick, though, because somebody would have to have all of what they needed.
Right, but just because somebody is in Chicago to do this doesn't mean that they live there.
It's true. No, there's definitely reasons why you can get in and get out Chicago in the same day.
Yeah.
So that's all we really know about the murders. We know what happened, but we still don't know who did them.
Yeah, but this changed the way everything was done from here on out.
Oh, this is the reason why we have the seals on our bottles now of Tylenol or anything else. Like Tylenol really went to extreme measures. I guess Johnson & Johnson did, but went to extreme measures to make sure that their product could get back onto the shelves. And they, with the FDA, came up with the seal around the bottle and stuff. And if, obviously if that has been messed with, you don't touch it.
Yeah, the seal on the lid and then the foil on the top, because it used to just be cotton. It used to just be like, open it up and then there was a piece of cotton in there and you pulled it out. And that was it. So now that they have the heat shrunk seals or the foil seals on the top, and they changed from capsules that you could pull apart to tablets.
Is that why they went to tablets?
Yes.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that either.
Yeah, that's why they don't use capsules anymore.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
So let's talk about the main suspects of this case. Nobody's ever been caught, but there are a few people who point towards
probably
this,
did it.
Who probably maybe did this. It points to them
allegedly
as a possibility, at least slightly.
Yeah.
So the first one, and probably your favorite one, Roger Arnold.
Oh, no, he's not the one, I think.
No?
No.
Oh, well, I guess we'll get into it.
We still got to talk about him anyway.
It's true, we do. So Roger Arnold, he was a dock worker who said some pretty suspicious things about the murders in a bar one night. And when police questioned him, this guy had a couple connections that made him more interesting to them than he had been originally. So first, he worked at a jewel warehouse, and Jewel's like a convenience store in the Midwest. And not only did he work there with one of the fathers of one of the victims, Mary Reiner. One of the other victims, Adam Janus, had purchased his bottle of Tylenol from a Jewel convenience store, and where Mary bought hers were across the street from where Roger's wife, this is getting tough, was across the street from where Roger Arnold's wife's psychiatric ward was located. So, okay.
Yeah, that's kind of reaching.
It's a lot. Okay. I'll be honest. It was a lot to say.
Yeah. So he worked at a jewel warehouse, and one of the victim's fathers worked with him, and then one of the other victims bought his Tylenol from a jewel store.
Yes, that was across the street from his wife's psychiatric ward. So there was a reason for him to be in the area.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Right. They also found 2 crime manuals in his home, and they also found out that he was...
2 what? 2 what?
They were described as crime manuals.
Like crime for dummies?
I don't think it's crime for dummies. I think it's more like, hey, here's an illegal thing and how to do it. I think.
They didn't have the internet back then.
Exactly. So I'm not sure where you get this. I don't know if it's passed around through the black market or whatnot. But what they also found out about him was he was somewhat of a chemist enthusiast, we'll say. So he had beakers and other types of chemistry equipment in his home, and they also found yeah, go ahead and say it.
So he was making meth.
They don't say that, but...
Well, who else is like an at-home chemist, like a DIY chemist?
Yeah.
That's Mexican Americans.
Yeah,
right?
I kind of thinking so.
Just checking.
Yeah. So anyway, but they call him an at-home chemist, a chemist enthusiast. But anyway, They also found a bag of powder, and the bag was tested. And though it turned out to be potassium carbonate and not potassium cyanide, so close, but not quite.
Is it close though, or do we not know?
Oh, I have no idea. I mean, they both start with potassium.
I was like, I have no idea what.
No.
Do people just have potassium carbonate, or is that an ingredient in meth?
Again,
see what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know the ingredients to meth or pretty much anything else like that. So,
okay.
If anybody is a scientist and knows, I would love to know. But
yeah, no.
Roger Arnold also refused to take a lie detector test, which he should have refused. Like, we agree with that. That's a smart choice. Fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they didn't have enough to prosecute him, but they had some connections to him.
Yeah. So he was talking shit at a bar that he had cyanide.
Right.
And that he had knowledge of this. And then there was some connection. I mean, I get why he's a big suspect, for sure. And then what he does after he became a big suspect was kind of like, hey, dude, if you don't want people to think you're a murderer, like, probably don't be a murderer.
Correct.
That would help.
That would help. And what he did next in 1983 did not help him, because in 1983, Roger Arnold was again at the bar, and he shot a man named John Stanisha, who Arnold thought had turned him into the police for his previous comments at the bar earlier.
Yeah.
It was later revealed that it was not Stanisha who said anything, but Stanisha did die of his wounds, and Arnold was sentenced to 30 years in jail, but he was let out early on parole for good behavior, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah, John Stanisha looked a little bit like the guy who actually turned him in. And so he was just like, oh, hey, you're the guy who turned me in, and shot him, because he was obviously an intoxicated, murderous DIY
son
chemist.
of a gun? No, I like that too.
And I also don't know how he got let out early. I mean, he killed a guy.
Right?
In cold blood on the street in Chicago, like in front of people. It wasn't even like in secret.
Because he thought he said something, and it wasn't even him.
Yeah. So that guy's a bad dude, but I don't think he was smart enough to pull this off, to be real honest.
No, it certainly doesn't seem like it. The next suspect is Ted Kaczynski. Does that name sound familiar to you?
Yeah, this is my favorite suspect.
Okay, so the Unabomber, for anybody who isn't familiar with Ted. Kaczynski's an Illinois native, which, already puts ties to him.
His parents lived in Chicago at this time.
And the first bomb of his that was found was in Chicago. So he's known to be around the Chicago area.
And to do stupid shit like this.
To do a lot of stupid shit. Yeah.
Yeah, because like 4 of his bombs ended up being in the Chicago area.
Yeah, so we know that he likes to stay local.
Yeah, and do bananas stuff on a random scale.
He does do that too. Absolutely.
Yep.
In 2009, FBI retested...
2009?
I know, I was going to say 19 and I stopped like 9. In 2009, the FBI retested all relevant evidence and requested a DNA sample from old Teddy there. And he said he was willing to provide a sample willingly on one condition. He wanted the courts to rule that the United States Marshals could not conduct an auction of his belongings. His reasoning was that people can have similar DNA, or what he would call partial DNA profiles. And if one person who did the crimes bought his items, his DNA could be tied to the killings. So he would give them the test if they wouldn't sell his stuff.
Yeah, which is not really how that works. And he didn't really understand how DNA works. But I'm just saying, but I don't necessarily disagree with him. I don't think they should have auctioned his stuff.
Correct.
I know why they did it. They were trying to give money to his victims and his victims' families. I get that. But by auctioning his stuff, you have no way to tie him to future crimes.
Right.
Like this. Like when he became a suspect in the Tylenol killings, if you want to go and test all of the stuff in his apartment to see if he had cyanide or any proof that he did the Tylenol killings, there would be no way to do that if you sold all of his stuff.
And that was something that he kind of sort of said too, but not in so many words. So yeah, he was like, you shouldn't do this. But he thought that his reasoning was because he would be able to keep his innocence from it. So anyway.
Yeah, he had some bananas reasoning.
Yeah, exactly.
They said no anyway, and they sold his shit. So
and he said
no then.
He said, okay, then I won't give you my DNA. So we're even.
Yeah. Which is not really a problem because he's a convicted felon. So they're going to take his DNA anyway. It's just whether or not they're going to do it unwillingly or willingly.
Yeah.
So
completely.
I'm pretty sure they got his DNA at some point.
So another interesting piece, which is a real shot in the dark, but 2 months prior to all of this happening, in Sheridan, Wyoming, a man named J. Adam Mitchell died in the same way. He was poisoned with Tylenol in Sheridan, Wyoming, which the reason this was connected to Ted was because Sheridan, Wyoming is on the way from Chicago to his hut. I mean, it's a cabin. It's a cabin in Montana, but it's a little hut. Like, it's a small little thing. There was that connection, too.
This could have been a test run.
Exactly.
Is the theory behind that. Yeah.
Exactly. So.
And the wood connection.
The wood connection is a big deal, and it's kind of out there. But
put your tinfoil hats on for this one, guys, because this is where it gets a little wonky.
I will let you say this one because this one takes me on all kinds of rides. So.
Yeah. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, had some weird
fascination,
hard-on, pun intended, for wood. Like, he liked to live in the woods, but he also had, like, a weird obsession with words that were connected to wood. Like, some of his victims had last names that were types of wood or actual wood.
Or in the forestry department.
Yes. And he would put the return addresses on some of his bombs would be like James Woods from Wood Lake, California at 123 Wood Street. Like,
Yep.
he had some weird thing with wood. The connection with the Tylenol murders with that would be that the founders of Johnson & Johnson's middle name was Wood.
Each of them had the middle name Wood, which is suspicious as can be, honestly, when you talk about someone like this.
Yeah, I mean, if you take your tinfoil hat and you receive
Yeah.
all that information, I love it. I think it's a fantastic theory.
You do love it.
Well, it's just so right up his alley, Ted Kaczynski. I mean, this is so something he would do. I mean, he literally did the exact same thing with bombs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, you're not wrong, and it does kind of make sense, but I don't know. When I first heard it, I didn't think it was likely at all, and the more that I've been listening to it, being the third episode, or the third time we've done this episode, you have kind of convinced me a little bit more than you had, so I will give you that.
All right, so now you can take your tinfoil hat off and go with the
prime suspect.
Suspect that everybody else thinks is the guy.
This is the suspect that everybody else thinks. His name is James Lewis. James Lewis does put himself into the thick of this, so it is kind of his fault.
Yeah, 100%.
So James Lewis seemed like a pretty normal guy. He was a tax accountant, and on Wednesday, October 6th, so about a week after the first death, Johnson & Johnson received a photocopy of a handwritten letter. Even though it wasn't the original, police were still smart enough to dust it for prints. James Lewis was not smart enough to realize that even though it wasn't the original, his handprint would still be on the paper, even though he didn't write on the paper. So,
yeah,
his fingerprint
this
showed
motherfucker made a copy of... Wait a second. He made a photocopy of the letter he wrote so that his fingerprints wouldn't be on it, and then touched it with his hands.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
Super smart.
So, the letter reads, Erica, would you like to read the letter to us?
Yeah, I'll read it. Trigger warning, guys. This is the dumbest thing you've ever heard. So, the letter reads, Johnson & Johnson, parent company of McNeil Laboratories. Gentlemen, as you can see, it is easy to place cyanide, both potassium and sodium, into capsules sitting on store shelves. And since the cyanide is inside the gelatin, it is easy to get buyers to swallow the bitter pill. Another beauty is the cyanide operates quickly. It takes so very little, and there will be no time to take countermeasures. If you don't mind the publicity of these little capsules, then do nothing. So far, I've spent less than $50, and it takes me less than 10 minutes per bottle. If you want to stop the killing, then wire $1 million to bank account number 8449597 at Continental Illinois Bank, Chicago, Illinois. Don't attempt to involve the FBI or local Chicago authorities with this letter. A couple of phone calls by me will undo anything you could possibly do, because his... Oh,
that's it.
That's it. The end.
Yeah. Because his prints were on the letter, a warrant for his arrest was issued, but James was nowhere to be found until December 13th. That's when he was spotted in New York at a local public library annex. And the crazy thing about the bank account number was that it wasn't linked to James Lewis. It actually belonged to a man named Frederick Miller McCahey, and James Lewis believed that his wife had not been paid for work she had done by McCahey.
For McCahey.
For McCahey, you're right. She was a bookkeeper. He believed that she was owed $511, and he thought if he did this, it would expose McCahey for not paying his wife the money, which, okay. But it was eventually ruled that Lewis had nothing to do with the murders and that he was just a big idiot and he did a really dumb thing like this.
Yeah.
This is a really, really dumb thing to do. Do not involve yourself in this.
Yeah. Well, and his mindset was that he would give his wife's ex-boss's bank account so that they would investigate him as the murderer and then find out that he didn't pay his employees. That was a check, but like that's not what's going to happen.
That was his idea. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not what's going to happen.
Correct.
Yeah. It's like this is so dumb. Anyway.
Well, it's not what happened either.
Yeah. Although his past also doesn't make him look very good either, just like Roger Arnold.
Well, that's the thing. So by him doing this, this put him on police radar, and they started looking into his past. They started seeing that, well, he actually may be the Tylenol murderer after all.
Yeah.
He had, like we said, a suspect history, and stuff like he chased his mother with an axe when he was 19, not to mention in 1966, when he was committed to the Missouri State Mental Hospital after ingesting 36 Anacin pills. And while he was there, he was diagnosed with catatonic schizophrenia. He was trying to say that both of these things were done to try and to avoid the Vietnam War. So he said that these were calculated. He meant to do these things to get out of Vietnam.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I would do to get out of the draft. You know, instead of just like moving to Canada, I would chase my mom around with an axe and try to take a bunch of Anacin pills and
just fake an injury, you know, and you wouldn't have to go.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, whether or not it was fake to get out of the Vietnam War, there was other things that he did that would make him pretty suspect in a murder case also, so.
Well, one of the big things was that he had been charged and acquitted for the murder of a man named Raymond West. What made this even worse was that Raymond West had been found completely dismembered in his own home in the summer of 1978.
Yeah, and he actually wasn't tried and acquitted. He was arrested.
He didn't get tried?
No, because they forgot to read him his Miranda rights.
Oh, I thought they figured that out while they were in trial.
Nope.
Oh.
Before they went to trial, and so the judge deemed everything that they found inadmissible, so they never were able to try him for it. But all the evidence pointed to him, but there was nothing they could do. I mean, he was the last person to see him. He was found with a $5,000 forged check from the guy. He even put a note on the guy's front door that if anybody had any questions about where he was, to call him.
So he puts himself in bad places.
Yeah, so when the guy went missing and people started going to his house, friends, they were like, why is there a note from his tax guy on the door, like, that says to call him? And then when people would call him, he'd be like, oh yeah, he's out of town. Well, then they ended up finding his body in his own house, so he was not out of town.
Yeah.
So he was definitely, something was allegedly going on there, but
Certainly
they forgot to read him his Miranda rights, and so they had to throw the whole thing out. This guy just gets like a break after a break after a break.
He does. He keeps doing that. Absolutely. Some other things that made Lewis a little suspicious was Lewis and his wife had launched a business venture, and it was a short one, but they were attempting to make pills, or they were attempting to bring pill making machines from India. So
yeah, they were involved in some kind of scheme there.
Right. So this is already suspect enough, and that's very specific. I mean, I don't know about you. I've never been involved with any kind of pill making.
Nope, just pill taken.
Hey.
Vitamins.
Right, of course.
Yeah, but he was also suspected of like huge credit card schemes and shit too, right? In the 80s.
He was in 1981, before the Tylenol murders. He was accused of making false credit card applications and using fake addresses with fake mailboxes, which is pretty cool because he would just put mailboxes in like cement.
Yeah. He took like a Home Depot bucket and filled it up with cement and put mailboxes in them and then just like moved them around the city.
Which, I mean, that's some thinking.
That's some 1980s shit now. Like, you would never get away with that now.
It's because it's a lawless land. That's why you could do stuff like this.
Yeah. Although it wasn't that lawless, because he got in trouble for this, and that's what made him skip town and run to Chicago and start living under a fake name.
It's true. In December of 1981, that's when police found enough evidence to arrest both Lewis and his wife, which is what caused both of them to flee. So
right.
While they were in Chicago, they lived under fake names, which was just short of a year. So they weren't there very, very long, but it would place Lewis in Chicago with a shady past right in line with when the Tylenol murders happened. So all of this lines up. Lewis is probably the one that did this.
Supposedly, everybody thinks so.
Except the Lewises bought Amtrak tickets from Chicago to New York City on September 4th, 1982. So 25 days before the first Tylenol death.
Yeah, so if they would have done it before they left for New York, the cyanide would have eaten through the capsules.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So they knew it couldn't have been that far out.
Mm-hmm.
One of the drugstore cameras did spot a bearded man who some people think looks a lot like Lewis, but nobody could really put a positive ID on it. And like we talked about, it's hard enough to positively ID somebody on security cameras today. Forget about doing it then. Like, they all look like Bigfoot. Yeah. So what does it matter?
Yeah.
Also, no one could place Lewis back in Chicago before the deaths, which is minimal. Like, it's a minor thing, but nobody could say that for sure that he had been there. So
yeah, but if he traveled back to Chicago under a fake name to commit mass murder by doing this, I doubt he like called up his buddies and was like, hey, let's have a beer while I'm in town. Like, he probably went there with the intention of not letting anybody know he was there.
Yeah, you definitely could be right. And police did check all the travel records, and there was no proof to suggest that either of the Lewises had returned back to Chicago. So
yeah, but they used tons of aliases, so who knows?
Very, very true. police never had anything to prosecute Lewis for the crimes, much less convict him, so they couldn't really do anything.
Except for the letter. They did have enough to convict him for the letter.
They did. He was convicted for extortion for his original letter writing caper, and then he was sentenced to 20 years in prison, but he only served 13 years of the 20 years, which, I mean, I think is a pretty fair thing. Like, 13 of 20?
Yeah.
That seems reasonable for writing a letter. A stupid letter.
Yeah, 13 years does seem like a lot for a letter, but I feel like they gave him that much because they thought he was the Tylenol murder. Like, they were, like, punishing him for more than just the letter.
Yeah, no, I think they gave him the max that they could, for sure.
Yeah.
While Lewis was in jail, he offered to help investigators with the Tylenol murder case, and he explained in detail about how someone might go about injecting the Tylenol capsules with lethal doses of cyanide.
Yeah, he drew them like a little diagram of a board where somebody would drill holes in it to hold the capsules so that they could go out to their car and then dump all the capsules out and then put the cyanide in and then put the lids back on and put it back in. And he said you could do it in like less than 5 minutes in the back of your car, which I guess is a pretty smart way to do it, but also I feel like unnecessary. Like somebody could just go buy one bottle of Tylenol, go back to their house, fill up all those capsules, and then just go into the store and dump a few of the capsules into each bottle that they wanted to lace. Like, they wouldn't have to do a few capsules out of each bottle all at the same time. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I get what you're saying. And I think it's real suspicious that he has an idea that quickly about what to do.
Yeah.
I mean, he did have that pill-making business.
Yeah, it just sounds like a dumb idea.
It does. But he had that pill-making business. So, I mean, maybe he had some inside information. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
It's hard to say.
I don't know. It just seems like the dumbest way to do it, so.
Well.
But this guy's not smart.
Right.
I mean, he's definitely not the sharpest tool in the shed, so.
No, he's not. But he was released from jail in 1995, and he lives in Cambridge, Massachusetts with his wife. And he's since published a book titled Poison, The Doctor's Dilemma, which he said the book had nothing to do with the Tylenol murders and that he regretted ever sending the police the letter in the beginning. So, which I'm sure he did because that put him on the map.
Yeah, his book about poisoning a town has nothing to do with the Tylenol murders.
Well, it was about poison, but it was about water being poisoned in like a South Missouri city. So like same but different kind of.
So like, yeah, the same.
Yeah, like so kind of like the same. But
yeah, this guy's just an asshole.
Right.
I don't think he did. If he did the Tylenol murders and he's doing all this, he's an asshole. And he's stupid.
I definitely think he's doing it to toy with the police. Absolutely.
Yeah, he is. But I don't think he's doing it to toy with the police because he did it. I think he's doing it to toy with the police because he didn't do it.
I think that could be part of it too. And I think that's probably likely. But you'll get a kick out of this. In 2010, he went on a public access radio show, and he went with the intention of promoting his book. But what ended up happening was he ended up giving a 48-minute interview that were mostly questions targeted to his involvement in the Tylenol murders. And and what happened was it was him and a host, and they had people call in, and pretty much everybody calling in was asking about the Tylenol murders. There was really not a lot else going on there. And everyone
nobody read his book.
Well, yeah, of course not. But everybody who came on, he kept directing them to, the lawyers, and he refused to make any more comments and stuff like that. So yeah, that makes sense. But I mean, he was just doing it to get some attention, I think. I don't think he had a whole lot to actually say.
Yeah, and I do understand why he wrote the letter. He's allegedly killed before, even though he wasn't charged with it because he got away with it. He was definitely into fraud, living under aliases. I mean, they definitely were doing bad stuff.
Definitely.
Like, I understand why he's the number one suspect. I just really don't think he's smart enough to be the guy, to be honest with you, because he wasn't even smart enough to realize that when you photocopy a handwritten letter, you still can't touch the photocopy or your fingerprints are going to be on it. You know what I mean?
Isn't that great?
But yet he was smart enough to not touch the pill bottles. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
Although that could have been by accident. It could have been because he knew he had to wear gloves to work with the cyanide.
absolutely.
So that could have been by accident that he didn't touch the pill bottles, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe he is the best suspect. I don't know.
There isn't a clear one. I think that's what the hard thing is about it, is there's a lot of people who have a lot to do with it, but nobody has a clear cut answer for who it was or, the likely scenario.
Yeah, like if they turn out to figure out someday who it was for sure, it could be any one of these three guys, and I'd be like, okay, makes sense.
It could be somebody completely different too.
Well, obviously, yeah. I just don't know how they're ever going to figure this one out.
I mean, without DNA, they may not.
Yeah, because they destroyed all the bottles.
Exactly. So I don't think they're going to be able to figure it out unless somebody confesses and can give them like proof that hasn't been released to the public. I don't know that they will be able to figure it out.
Right.
They don't have much to go off of.
At least we now know that people can't do this now because of all the tamper-proof stuff that it caused. It also caused the federal government to put laws into place that makes tampering with consumer products a felony.
Good.
A federal offense.
Good.
If anybody did this now, first of all, they'd get caught because of DNA and surveillance cameras and everything else. But they also couldn't do it now because things are so much better sealed.
I think about this with every single crime that happens. I'm like, did anybody think they were going to get away with that? There's ways to track people everywhere. Like always satellites watching us or something. Like you can't get away with anything. Stop trying.
Yep. Well, good case, Grant. Good job.
Thank you.
I'm glad we finally got it done on the third recording.
Well, we haven't saved it yet, so if you're hearing this, then hey, we did it. If not, then we ditched the Tylenol Murders altogether.
So we also decided that we needed to come up with a way to end each episode instead of change your Amazon Smile, because Amazon got rid of their Smile program and we hate them and we're all going to cancel our Prime together, right?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Although I still haven't done mine yet, so don't do yours yet, guys, either. I mean, unless you want to, then do it. But don't do it because I'm telling you to. Just never mind. Anyway, so we decided that we're going to close out each episode with just like a short synopsis of a missing person and just give you the real basic details of a missing persons case. And then we'll post some pictures on social media in case anybody has any information. So the missing person that we're going to be telling you about this week is James Joseph Allen. And his name, his profile doesn't have a lot of information except that he was in contact with his family sporadically. And the last time they had contact with him was April 20th of 2022. So almost a year ago. And he was in his truck, his Honda Ridgeline, with his trailer attached to it, a camping trailer, and his dog named Hannah, who was a white curly-haired dog. And he was supposedly going camping west of Las Vegas. So maybe in the Red Rock area or Death Valley maybe. They don't really know, but his family hadn't heard from him, and when they tried to contact him, his cell phone was disconnected, and he hasn't been seen since. So we're going to post pictures of James Allen and his dog and his RV, so in case any of you have seen him.
Let's find him together.
Yeah, it's just hard to believe that a truck, a trailer, a dog, and a person, where...
Those are some big items.
Yeah, and it's not like his trailer was where one of these DIY chemist people would be doing, it was a really nice travel trailer. It was a GeoPro. They're pretty expensive. His truck was in good shape. If you saw it out in the desert, you wouldn't think, oh, it's just an abandoned trailer.
Yeah, and the good thing is that this was recent, so we have good photos of what we're looking for. So you can go to our Instagram and see what it is that he's got and see if maybe, just maybe, you've crossed paths with him.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, that's it for us this week, and we will see you next time.
All right. I love you.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye.
This podcast has been a production of Orange Halo Media, LLC, hosted by Grant and Erica. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. To chat with us, go to From Crime to Crime on Instagram, From Crime to Crime on TikTok, From Crime 2 Crime on Twitter, or you can visit our website at FromCrime2Crime.com. See you next Wednesday.